All right. Good day, everyone, and welcome to Conversations on Retail. My name is Matt Pfeiffer. We are so excited to welcome Jorge Risquez, co-founder and CEO of BOPS, back to continue his series called CPFR 2.0. And today's conversation features John Davis, who's very well known in the Northwest Arkansas supplier community. He's a CPFR and supply chain expert, does a lot of teaching here. And today, Jorge and he will be talking about collaborative replenishment as a competitive advantage. Just a couple of housekeeping issues. I know we've got several folks that are planning to be with us today. Hopefully, many will make it live. This series is sponsored, of course, by our friends at BOPS, and you can learn more about their business at bops.ai. Also, just a reminder that if you are joining live, that this is intended to be a conversation and not a presentation. So as you have questions, we hope that you'll click the Q&A button in Zoom and submit those in writing. Jorge will see those and incorporate those into his conversation as time allows. Lastly, just a reminder that the opinions or recommendations expressed by Jorge and his guests are their own and not necessarily those of Conversations on Retail. So before acting on those opinions or recommendations, make sure that you always consider them based on your own unique set of circumstances. So with that, Jorge, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Matt. And welcome, John, to the CPFR 2.0 show. Super excited to have you here today.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
And I think Matt did a fantastic job introducing you, but I do want to add on top of Matt that I think you have a tremendous expertise on replenishment. I'm excited to talk about the execution, the inventory execution piece of the CPFR, which I think it's incredibly important and effective for CPFR, especially under the collaborative commerce between retailers and suppliers. You work for one of the major retailers in the US. Apart from that, you have been in some technology companies providing retail analytics and replenishment. You're also a professor in the Northwest Arkansas Community College teaching replenishment supply chain. So again, we're all going to talk today about replenishment and the importance of replenishment, especially from the supplier's angles, and how can you use replenishment as a competitive advantage to drive value at retail. So why don't you start, John, kind of defining replenishment for us and why is it important?
Well, sure. Replenishment just in the rawest form is I had something, it sold, it went away, I need to put it back. So when you bring that into the world of retail, it's, a function of I've got a lot of inventory in, I've got customers coming, they're buying my product. How do I keep that inventory flowing to meet that customer demand, which leads us back to, conversations around forecast, the F in the CPFR. So they all work together. So getting your replenishment plan together to feed that forecast and manage the forecast based on customer behavior is what we're talking about.
No, much appreciated. And what makes it hard? I think when we were both discussing or briefing towards kind of replenishment in this episode, one thing that stood out to me was that if you do replenishment right, no one notices. But if you do it wrong, everybody points at you. So as a replenishment manager for a retailer, or as a replenishment manager or CPFR from a supplier standpoint, why replenishment is so hard?
Replenishment is a really weird animal, and those of us who get into it and it triggers something. There's folks that have been in it for years and years and years. Sometimes we worry about each other because to like this is an interesting psychological conversation in and of itself, but I'll let that go. It's hard in that, and I've had a lot of conversations with prospective analysts and people that I was interviewing to hire. And one of my fun questions to ask at the end of all the interviews was, how do you feel about being wrong 100% of the time? Not 99, not 98, 100% of the time you're going to be wrong. And most people laugh. It doesn't sink in. There are some people who wired, I say that, and you can see a little bit of panic in their face. The color washes from their eyes. But so, the art of forecasting and the activities you take to move product, and there's so many uncontrollables. if you have the perfect forecast, your manufacturing works, and you load the truck, but the truck has a flat tire, it gets stolen, it doesn't arrive on time, you've got a problem. You're not in control of it, but you're ultimately accountable for it. So those kind of things you kind of allude to, it's difficult in that you're the face of in stock when you're in the replenishment role. And when something goes wrong, and there are just myriad issues that could happen that some can plan for, some are just not plannable, and they just happen. So, I mean, some of those things make it really hard, and it gets difficult when, to your point, if everything goes perfect, nobody says anything because everybody expects product to be on the shelf, product to be delivered to the customer, just as that customer buys it. Obviously, we know, life is what life is, and realities hit, and you've got to be ready to answer. So it's difficult in that you've got to kind of look at everything. You have to be ready for everything. It's an odd profession.
No, I bet, and I live it every day as well with Bob, especially helping some of our suppliers. But I think if I go back to kind of a skill or an attribute or a quality or a trait from what a replenishment manager needs to have or a CPFR needs to have, is they need to be nimble and flexible. They need to be able to kind of adapt. And the reason why I say that, back to your point, is there's never going to be an 100% forecast accuracy. There's always going to be fluctuations due to external factors that you cannot control. So replenishment needs to be there at the forefront, firefighting to ensure that you could at least address what you can control. And I think you need to be nimble. You got to be like an entrepreneur where you need to be adapting all the time. So that leads me into kind of the next question, right? You need to be nimble. You need to be adjusting, right? Sales rates are always changing. They could be impacted by a promotion and advertising and weather event, or even your inventory might be impacted, as you said, right, with a problem with a truck, or a shipping problem. How do you think the use of technology and the use of data, or I would like to go more deep, the use of actual insights and prescriptions are useful for the role of a replenishment? And in this case, as a replenishment manager, helping or trying to get the product at the shelf at the retail space.
Absolutely, and it's critical. The use of data. I've often equated the role of a replenishment manager inside of a retailer, or that key replenishment analyst at the supplier. That role is a lot like what I call an inner city trauma doctor on a Saturday night. You never know what's going to come through those doors. And when it comes through those doors, it comes in hot, it comes in emotional, and there's a lot of damage and collateral that you've got to deal with. And so really quickly, you have to triage. So somebody comes screaming in, somebody comes screaming in. It usually comes in an email or you get a call. Hey, I was in this store and there's just nothing but empty shelves. Okay, triage. What's going on? Is it just that store? And the way to do that, to do it quickly, is data. You've got to, and having those metrics available at the ready and being able to pull them together and interpret them is a key skill. Now, where that skill gets leveraged is with technology, and the advancements that are being made now in visualization, in predictive analytics, machine learning. A lot of those things can get bubbled up early. The visualization tools that are out there make those things easier to see, a little bit faster. They don't, where we're headed, and we can talk future, but we're headed more, predictive and prescriptive, and we're kind of there. But what we have today, in what you need, if you don't have it, is to find a way that you can have a good solid dashboard to tell you which rabbit trail to go down. Because at the end of the day, when you talk about replenishment, Generally, the metric that triggers some sort of reaction isn't in stock. In stock goes below whatever the goal is. So of all the things you can look at, which another question that often I get asked is, what data do supply chain teams need? What data do replenishment teams need? And my immediate semi-smart aleck response is they need all of it. Because you don't know. I need all of that data. The second, little less smart alecky, is I need whatever metrics the buyer wants, whatever metrics the replenishment manager wants, and whatever cadence they need. But with all of that, I'm going to look at, I've got an in-stock problem. The first thing I'm going to do is go to on time in full. Did I get everything that I ordered, and did I get it in the time that I expected to get it? Those two metrics, there's a reason why every retailer makes a big deal about those and some issue fines for it, because if those two metrics are not in line, there is absolutely nothing that can be done with a forecast, with a safety stock setting, with any of those kind of things that will fix that, because right there is the beginning of what the system expects when they expect it. So it makes all of its calculations based on all of that going in there. And of course, in there, if that's a rabbit trail, you got a bad on time. You go down the rabbit trail of, are my settings right with lead times and process times, and all the things that go into that. If there's a fill rate issue, is the forecast in line? Is manufacturing really in tune with the forecast? All those kind of things. So after on time in full, then I'm looking at just kind of a time supply, my days of supply, weeks of supply, just as a barometer of, do I have enough to cover those lead times? Is it, and then the fourth is the forecast itself. So really, it's just those four things attached to an in-stock that kind of begin the rabbit trail, just that you can go down. So the more technology, the more visualization you have, the faster you can find the bucket that you need to dive in. And of course, speed is always everybody's goal. They want to know an answer, and they want to know it now.
No, that's spot on. And I think I want to use those four metrics that you just mentioned, because I think today with technology and algorithms, we pick the OTIF, we pick the in-stock, we pick the out-of-stock. You could really have capabilities to really grab each of those at a store item level, or it depends on really how you want to analyze the data. But obviously, store item being the most effective, because that's where out-of-stocks happen and overstocks happen. And then from there, be able to give you an algorithmic exception of, this is what's happening. By the way, out of all my exceptions, let's just say we have 100 exceptions or 1,000 exceptions or 1,000,000 exceptions. These are the top 10, top 20 that we need to prioritize, because these are the ones that have the most value to avoid out of stocks. Those are some of the kind of examples of where we're seeing kind of data and obviously algorithm that extract insights to be able to put them in front of a replenishment manager to be able to kind of at least influence how we're addressing out of stocks. I have a hard question for you. This makes sense for out of stocks, but and especially in stocks, right? It makes sense for out of stocks, but you could have a very good in stock of 99 or 98%, but this could be creating also overstocks. What are some of the techniques or things that we as suppliers could do to influence overstocks? And again, we could think outside of the box to think about retail media and influencing and doing advertising to do demand shaping. But what are some of your thoughts that a replenishment managers could do to help avoid overstock and therefore avoid markdowns, and in some cases, like food and beverage, avoid waste?
That is a fantastic question, and it's difficult. And honestly, in my experience, most do not go that direction. We all want to sell stuff. Whether you're a supplier or retailer, our only real job is to sell stuff. So the thought of not selling as much in is kind of foreign. However, to your point, if you get overstocked, a lot of things are going to stop upstream. And ultimately it affects your manufacturing, the labor attached to that, sourcing, all of that. But to directly to your question, if I'm sitting in an analyst chair at a supplier that I want to avoid overstock as much as I want to avoid out of stock. That's where, so even when you have items that are in great in stock, like you said, 99 plus 98, whatever is greater than the category goal, if you keep an eye on time supply, so depending on the volume of your business, if it's super high volume and you track in days of supply, or if it's really slow volume and you go in weeks of supply, those need to be in what you look at every day. So when you look at your item catalog every day, obviously you're going to look at sales. Everybody's going to look at sales. You want to look at the in stock. I want to see on time and full. I want to see my forecast variance, and I'll definitely want to see my days or weeks of supply. And if I watch that every day, those metrics, just a handful of metrics, if I watch those every day, when something goes out of line, it will just jump out at you on the screen. And so, yeah, I see where Mr. Groves has popped in there. Yeah, you look forward and you look backwards. So when you find I'm overstocked, or I've got a potential to be overstocked, sometimes the answer is good, because when I look forward, I've got a spike coming up. I've got an event. I've got a holiday. We're building towards something. And of course, in the mix is always you're looking for patterns. So are the stores that are acting this way, are they all attached to one DC or a group of DCs in a region that might lead you down a transportation challenge? Or is it truly random? Or is it a store type? Is it a demographic? You get into traits and all of that kind of thing. So there's just like I love the medical analogies with replenishment. Aside from the inner city trauma doctor, the other one is Dr. House, if you ever watch the show.
Yes.
And when they do the differential diagnostics on trying to find weird things. And today, the systems, the algorithms and so forth are really good at managing the 80 or 90%. It's those things that fall out of the norm. Forecast may do a big demand spike immediately prior to a store closure for a holiday. Well, nobody wants to deal with that. Some of them are impossible to deal with, and we back that up and smooth it. So you've got to be looking ahead and being ready for those goofy things and dealing with it.
No, spot on. I agree with you. I think today technology is at a point where 80%, at least of the volume, could be at least managed in a smooth way. Then the challenges or those exceptions are the 20%, which could be a lot of store item combinations for a replenishment manager on the retail side and also on the supplier side. Why do you think suppliers need to have a CPFR or a replenishment manager? Do you think it's because of the exceptions and the need to be able to point those out, the over or under inventory to the replenishment managers, and in some cases to the buyers? Is that really kind of one of their main jobs? But I think just here brainstorming with you, what's your perspective there? And also, what makes up a good supplier CPFR versus a not good supplier CPFR?
There's a lot there to unpack, Jorge. You may have to remind me of the second part when I get to it. The investment a supplier can make in supporting a retailer, regardless of what that retailer's logo looks like. Some of the best money spent is someone who can focus on the replenishment element. I'm gonna do some overstatements, but I'm gonna say all suppliers have somebody that can sell really good, obviously, because you got into that retailer. And everybody loves that. It's the fun part. You get to do the marketing, the packaging, the social media, all the kind of fun stuff. You get to go do the negotiation with the retailer and get the deal, and you got the store count. But that just starts it. Who's going to keep it alive day to day to day? Now, there are a lot of small, mid-sized suppliers where that onus falls back on that same sales position. And depending on the size of the catalog, it can be done. It is done. I'm going to argue that it's not done well because it's really two different disciplines. The talent and the personality makeup of somebody who does the sales or does the negotiation, gets in there, does the hard business stuff, watching the P&L and managing toward that is a different set of skills than my job is to get up and I'm looking at the EKG of my business every day. And I don't know why I keep going medical. I must be frustrated.
That's totally fine. My dad is a doctor, so I love medical analogies.
Well, okay, there it is. My dad's an accountant, so
There you go.
yeah. There's a reason I'm not an accountant, but anyway, I digress. When you look at the skill set you need to be, it's just super detailed, and you're looking at every little pedantic thing to try to figure out what's going on and to be able to answer questions, because even if everything's going smooth, when it comes time for line review, you're going to get renewed, or you're going to get more stores, or you're trying to work in another item and you need to apply a new forecast to try to that on an item that's not been done before. You need somebody who understands the everyday ebb and flow to bring that to fruition. And one of the biggest things, and this is where it gets very intangible, that I've experienced over the years, is seeing the benefit that it brings. It helps lower what I just call the hassle factor, because when those buyers are working with their category advisors, managers, and their planners, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with their line review, how they want to shake up the shelf and the offering in store particularly, one thing inevitably comes up, whether it's line review or a JBP kind of thing, is that a good buyer will ask the cross-functional team. So they're talking to their planners, their replenishment folks, anybody who's involved. They'll ask about how is that supplier to work with, and inevitably the ones that have good replenishment, if it's one person or a team of people, doesn't matter, but if they have a good replenishment manager on the supplier side, they check a big positive box, and because it reduces the hassle factor. I've had small suppliers in my history that, in the grand scheme of things, far outperformed the big ones, simply because the effort they took in the replenishment space. And they would actually do things. They would bring issues quickly. I would actually, to your earlier point about overstock, one of the magic words was, hey, I've got all these stores over here that are running low. We need to pump them up. But by the way, there's an offsetting set of hundreds of stores that are too heavy, and we'd like to back those off. And so we'll find a way to, keep the inventory, or actually lower the inventory, but improve the overall productivity, and you get turns and all the things there. And you need somebody in that position that's focused on that, not necessarily focused on all the things that a sales organization needs to focus on to make that really work.
Oh, I appreciate no, and thank you so much for, I like the hassle factor attribute you gave to kind of how we could improve with replenishment, because I think to the audience, right, if I put myself in as being a retailer replenishment manager, right? Owning 15, 20 different type of suppliers within my department or category. There's so much SKUs, combinations, and things that I need to be able to manage. So if I have John as my CPFR for one of my suppliers that is always on top, he not only goes and follows those KPIs that he mentioned, but at the same time, he simplifies it for me that I could actually just go and act upon it. Do I need to go adjust a forecast, a planning parameter? Do I need to change a particular parameter within the system? Do we need to stop because we need to go delete items because there's the mod coming in very soon? So there's different angles and avenues that the RMs do that if you could use the different techniques we are outlining in this conversation and your competition is not doing it, then you're going to be good at really not managing, or as I think it is Mr. Groove just mentioned, right? Keeping the product in there, but also winning at the shelf towards your competitors. So I appreciate you sharing that, Mr. Grove, and happy to bring any other comments. What's the future of replenishment, John? I think we got 4 more minutes, and obviously I want to open the forum for questions, but we briefly touched upon technology, but do you think there's always going to be that human element to drive those exceptions? What do you think is the future of replenishment with everything that is happening in the world?
Yeah, I think we've only seen the tip of the iceberg on what technology can bring to us in this space. And like I said, it's predictive and prescriptive is the now and the future. And I think as AI, as machine learning that gets honed, it just becomes a stronger tool. But at some point, I think, to your point, at some point, there's somebody who has to kind of sanity check. Like I said, machine learning algorithms, just based on pure demand, will put random spikes in places that would really hurt. Okay, we do need to have that buildup, but somebody needs to say, oh, this is a repeatable from last year, or this is something new and unique, and we need to plot out and tell the system how we would like to smooth that, or bring in it early, or what we want to bring in early, and then what we'll hang till after the event, or so forth. Something that's truly exception based. Brian, thank you.
Spot on. And I think there's an open question here for us. How can brokers leverage better replenishment capabilities to help their brand grow in retail at their retail channels? Do you have any perspectives there, John?
I think it's everything we talked about. I know a lot of, especially smaller mid-size suppliers, even some big name players in the CPG space take advantage of brokers, largely for what I was just talking about, having somebody who is laser focused on a retailer's business. So you can engage some of the bigger brokers, and they'll have a Walmart team, they'll have a Kroger team, a Meijer team, and so forth. And they're focused, they know what those retailers want, and they can help advise back into the supplier to address those and leverage those capabilities available. Plus, they have the ability to maybe invest in higher levels of technology than maybe a smaller mid-sized supplier from an IT standpoint.
But I do want to bring back one of the comments you mentioned during the conversation, that I think usually a sales broker or a brand broker will get you there, will get your product in there, which is a different type of skills of having someone day-to-day finding those exception-based algorithms to be able to really manage your inventory at the retail store. So I think it's always a capability I'm assuming a lot of brokers are looking for to support some of their suppliers, be more profitable and continuously grow efficiently at their retail accounts. So I just wanted to add that.
Yes. And a lot of them are adding or putting more investment in their supply chain teams, not just their sales teams at the broker level. To the point here that Brian made, is on time in full, we've always held a hard standard, but today it's not a suggestion. It is absolutely critical that those things are in place, and that everything that you could possibly do from your position in a supplier to have forecast correct, sourcing in place, manufacturing in place, and absolutely have transportation lined up, whether it's your transportation or you're taking advantage of the retailer's transportation. You have to have those absolutely buttoned up, and that is more than a full-time job.
And but
it's table stakes. Those are absolutely table stakes to keep the business and to grow the business. Absolutely.
100% agreed, and I think it's easier said than done. I do think, yes, with everything that is happening in technology, data, we were talking about exception-based, but I do think it always comes down to if John and Jorge could get along, and I listened to John and his requirements, John as the retailer, I should definitely kind of get the information in a way that John likes to work on. Do you see a future where retailers are templatizing exceptions, where these are the fields we need, so that it makes it easier for suppliers to be able to kind of adjust to each of the retailers?
Good point. And one of the things I always did as a supplier, and I did it on the retail side to my suppliers, was I would always ask, what is the information you need, and in what cadence? Usually it's I need a weekly email by a certain time. They'll give you a day and time, and I need to have these pieces of information plus whatever it is that you see that you think I ought to pay attention to. Now, whether they have the time or it rises to the level of the highest priority for them that week, you never know. I've had emails, and you work on those as a supplier. You'll spend hours on that one email, but you got to do it exactly like that buyer wants, exactly like that replenishment manager wants, just to get through the initial filter. When I would get emails that were just random complaints, or you need to go do this, you need to go do that, I can't. Even if I wanted to, I can't. There's too many of you. And the store item combinations, the supplier combinations are too high. So that's one thing you have to keep in mind, especially as a small, medium-sized supplier. It's you and your book of business, which is extraordinarily important to you and your company. But when you go into these bigger retailers, it's a much smaller piece of the P&L. So you have to really play ball in that. I'm going to give my points of contact exactly what they want, when they want it, and be really intentional and mindful of the suggestions I bring or the issues I raise. Make sure they are the most important issues for you, and keep raising them until you get an answer. Either stop asking, or okay, we'll go look into it. You never know, and then you go on to the number 2 on your list. So that is a human tightrope walk. That relationship and trust will determine how effective that is. It's built up over time, unfortunately.
John, it's been an absolute pleasure having you today. We're right on time. Thank you so much for sharing about replenishment, collaborative replenishment between kind of retailers and suppliers in the consumer goods industry. We much appreciate all your teachings, and thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you, Matt, at Conversations in Retail.